Today we are going to talk about a Punjabi poet, Bulleh Shah. There are many adaptations of his Punjabi poems into English. We are going to take into consideration one that is written by Tawfiq Rafat, who is also a Pakistani poet. Now, coming towards Bulleh Shah, who is he? Well, he's a Punjabi poet, and his name, actual name was Bulleh Shah. He has also been considered Mir Bulleh Shah Qadri, and some of the people also called him Baba Bulleh Shah. He was born in 1680 in Pandako, Tehsil Kasur, Lahore. I'm going to read some verses in Punjabi and then I'm going to translate them in English. These verses have been written by Bulleh Shah. मूँ आई बात न रहिंदी है, झूठ अखां ते कुछ बचदा है, सच अखियां बांबड़ मचदा है, जीव वोहां गल्लां तो जचदा है, हच हच के ऐहा कहंदी है, मूँ आई बात न रहिंदी है. Now, obviously, most of you might not be able to understand, maybe because you're not Punjabi, maybe you're like me that you are a Punjabi but you don't know Punjabi. So, at first when I read it, all I could understand was the first line, that is, "Muh ai baat na rehndi hai," because that I understand easily. The rest of it I had to read twice. Now I'm going to read the English so that we can make out the meaning. Whatever comes to my mind cannot be withheld. See, it is the translation of "Muh ai baat na rehndi hai." There is some saving if I lie. Jhoot akhan te kuch bachda hai. There is some saving if I lie. If I speak the truth, it generates fireworks. Such akhyan bhambad machda hai. So bhambad is, it's like a chaotic sounds all together. So the translated version could be fireworks, right? I'm reluctant to do either. Ji doha gallan to hachda hai. It means that he doesn't want to do the both. He feels some kind of hesitation. The tongue, however, considers it befitting to speak out. Hach hach ke eha kendi hai. Whatever comes to my mind cannot be withheld. So, see how beautifully it has been written. So, anyhow, let's get back to his life. So, we have got to know where he was born, how many names he has been given, and he is universally admitted to have been the greatest of the Punjabi mystics. Right? A large amount of what is known about Bulleh Shah comes through legends and therefore is subjective. And then he belonged to a Sayyid family. Some hold the view that he was born in Ach Galena in Bahawalpur, from where his parents shifted to Malikwal, that is Sahibal, and then to village Pandoke, where his father was employed as a preacher and a teacher. A verse written by him is often quoted in this respect. Asi uchche sadi zaat uchchi, asi uch sharif te rehn wale. So this is how his family was, right? Now the translated version of these verses are: we are respectable with high caste and belong to Uch Sharif. Uch Sharif is the name of a place. His family tree, with 14 generations in retrospect, converges with Hazrat Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jalani historians are not in agreement regarding the exact place of his birth or even his exact date of birth. Similar are the views regarding his date of the death. He was born during the 21st year of Emperor Aurangzeb's reign and died during the short reign of Alamgir II at the age of 78. Again, two views are offered regarding his family background. One, that he was brought up on strictly Muhammadan lines, as we can see in his writings. The other view is that his education was conducted on Darweshi lines. But considering the fact that Bulleh Shah's father was much enraged when he became a Sufi and disciple of Shah Inayat Qadri, it can be concluded that his education proceeded on religious lines like it was the custom in good families those days. After completing his education, he moved to Lahore in search of spiritual guide. The other view is that it was just a visit and his meeting with the spiritual guide Shah Inayat Qadri, who he called Murshid as well, was purely accidental. The story has it that Shah Inayat, called Shah Inayat Qadri, was the chief gardener in Shalimar Garden, Lahore, where Bulleh Shah had walked in to pick up some mangoes. He looked at one ripe mango and uttered Allahu Ghani, and the mango fell in his lap. He repeated Allah Ghani a number of times and soon his lap was full of mangoes. At that instant, Shah Inayat appeared on the scene and accused Bulleh Shah of stealing the mangoes. Bulleh Shah pleaded that he had not stolen the mangoes but they had fallen into his lap by themselves. He demonstrated that to Shah Inayat by invoking the word Allah Ghani. Shah Inayat, instead of being impressed by Bulleh Shah, took pity on him and said, "You do not know how to correctly pronounce Allah Ghani and are thus not utilizing the full power of this attribute of God." This actually changed Bulleh Shah's mind, who fell at the feet of Shah Inayat and requested him to be taken as his disciple, which was immediately granted. Bulleh Shah was so much impressed and carried away by the charisma of Shah Inayat that in one of the couplets he expresses total confidence in his internship that he would lead him to his goal. Bulleh Shah di suno hakayat, hadi pakdiya hog hadayat. Mera Murshid Shah Inayat o langaye par. So the translation of these verses are: listen to the story of Bulleh Shah, who has discovered a spiritual guide by the name of Shah Inayat, who will take him across to the destination. The third story has it that having introduced himself, Bulleh Shah requested Shah Inayat to guide him as to how to reach God. Thereupon Shah Inayat Qadri replied, "Bulleh Rab da paan hai, idron pattan udron laan hai." O Bulleh Shah, the secret of God is that on the one side he uproots and on the other he plants, meaning thereby that it required detaching one's mind from the worldly interests and attaching it to the intimate service of God so that one could flourish. Whichever is the correct story, the fact of the matter is that Shah Inayat Qadri was a Sufi of great scholarly disposition. The Qadri family of the Punjab was famous for their philosophic studies. They were believed to have converted Tara Shikoh and were themselves very much inclined towards Hindu philosophy. Author of several books, Shah Inayat Qadri in his Dastur-e-Awwal describes the various stages, methods employed for salvation, recording the knowledge gained by the Muslim mystics from the Greek soldiers of Alexander the Great. He had also written commentaries on the Quran and other books which are believed to have been lost along with his library in a fire in the house of his descendants during Maharaja Ranjit Singh's rule. Now, what happened that Bulleh Shah's family was highly displeased with him for having selected Shah Inayat Qadri as his murshid or the spiritual guide on two accounts. One, for Shah Inayat being a convertee from a low caste Hindu family, Kambo caste, and the second for having predominantly Hindu interests. The altercation is mentioned by Bulleh Shah in his poetry as under ਭੁੱਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਾਵਣ ਆਈਆਂ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਤੇ ਭਰਜਾਈਆਂ ਅਲ ਨਬੀ ਔਲਾਦ ਅਲੀ ਦੀ ਭੁੱਲਿਆ ਤੂੰ ਕੀ ਲੇਕਾ ਲਾਈਆਂ ਮੱਲੇ ਬੁੱਲਿਆ ਸਾਡਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਛੱਡ ਦੇ ਪੱਲਾ ਅਰਾਈਆਂ. Now the translation of these verses is Bulleh Shah's sisters and sisters-in-law came to advise him. O Bulleh, you have degraded the family of the Prophet and the descendants of Ali. Listen to us and snap the relationship with Arai family. That means Shah Inayat. Bulleh is known to have responded by saying, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸੈयद ਆਖੇ ਦੋਜ਼ਖ ਮਿਲਨ ਸਜ਼ਾਈਆਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਰਾਈ ਆਖੇ behishti pinga paia. Behisht means Jannat. Now the third verse I cannot pronounce because I have no clue what he's trying to say because my Punjabi is not that good, but I'm going to read the translated version of these lines so that we can understand. He who calls us a Sayyid shall receive punishment in hell. He who calls us a Rai shall have swings in the heavens. O Bulleh, if you want pleasure in life, become the disciple of a Rai, Shah Inayat. So that is simple, that through these lines, Bulleh Shah tried to convince everybody that Shah Inayat is it. He is everything. Having broken with the staunch and orthodox religious family, Bulleh Shah was now free to behave in accordance with his free nature. Although political situation of that time was against the Sufis, it forbade him to speak against the established Muslim practices, but he did not pay any heed to even Shah Inayat Qadri's advice and continued to utter whatever came to his mind. So Bulleh Shah was a rebel as well. He had a mind of his own. He actually defied the advice of Qadri even. Here is an example from his writings. Bulleh nu lok ਮੱਤੇ ਦੇਂਦੇ ਬੁੱਲਿਆ ਤੂੰ ਜਾਬੇ ਮਸੀਤੀ ਮਸੀਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜੋ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਨਮਾਜ਼ ਨਾ ਨੀਤੀ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਪਾਕ ਕਿਤੇ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੁਮਾ ਅੰਦਰੋਂ ਗਈ ਨਾ ਪਲੀਤੀ ਬਿਨ ਮੁਰਸ਼ਦ ਕਾਮਿਲ ਬੁੱਲਿਆ ਤੇਰੀ ਇਉਂ ਗਈ ਇਬਾਦਤ ਕੀਤੀ. Now obviously these lines are a bit difficult, but it is obvious that Bulleh Shah is trying to say that if you're not clean from within, there is no use of, exterior decoration. Now I'm going to read the translated version. People advise Bulleh to go and worship in the mosque. What use is worshipping in the mosque if the prayer is not said from within the heart? when he says jo dilo namaz na niti, he says if your intention is not coming from your heart, within your heart, then there is no usage. What use is purifying the exterior when the interior is still filthy? Your prayer is of no use. There is no guidance of a perfect murshid. So he's not okay with people following the followed. Right? Shah Inayat Qadri, who although a Sufi outwardly was a practicing Muslim, he practiced Haqiqat under the garb of Tariqat. The above utterances of Bulleh Shah are the evidence of disobedience of the Sharia, annoyed Shah Inayat, with the result that, as a gesture of registering his annoyance with his disciple Bulleh Shah, he left Lahore. This put Bulleh Shah on the defensive, who tried all the various ways to get closer to his murshid again, but nothing would work. As a last resort, he thought of exploring the weakness of his murshid for dances and music. To be able to do that, he started to learn the art from a dancing girl. Once reasonably proficient, he moved to Lahore to make a final attempt to appease his murshid. So you see, Bulleh Shah was a real devotee. He wanted to impress his murshid, so he learned dancing for him so that he can, make his murshid happy. One day, as Bulleh Shah's luck would have it, he found Shah Inayat at the entrance of the mosque where Bulleh Shah had already positioned himself earlier. Seeing him entering the mosque, Bulleh Shah, dressed like a woman, started to sing and dance. The crowd also gathered to witness there as Shah Inayat came out. He also stopped there to witness the performance. Seeing Shah Inayat, Bulleh Shah started to sing. Now these are some verses in Punjabi. I cannot read them, but I'm going to read the English version. Never again shall I bear pride for my beloved Ranja. O friend, tonight do stay in my house. Undo the knots of your heart and laugh along with me. O friend. Shah Inayat understood the gesture and, getting closer to Bulleh Shah, asked him, "Are you not Bulleh?" "No, Hazrat, I am not Bulleh, but Bullah, the forgetful and the repentant one." Bulleh Shah was then forgiven and thereafter lived with Shah Inayat for the rest of his life. The Multan Gazette mentions Bulleh Shah as a writer of religious ballads called Kafis. Apart from the above, the Gazette does not mention what influence his poems had on the youth or the general public. It appears he practiced asceticism, one who retires into solitude for practicing mystical self-discipline to a certain extent, which he also preached. The fact that he did not marry and his sister also followed his example also reinforces that conclusion. His saintly character, simplicity and directness of his poetic style has made him very popular amongst saints who profess Sufism. This, of course, is restricted to the Punjab and the surrounding area because the limitations of the Punjabi language, although it was widely understood especially by the peasants of Multan and Delhi, where it is understood with small differences of dialect. The language of his works also has a mixture of Sanskrit, Arabic, and Persian words popular at that time. The infiltration of the Sanskrit words is believed to have crept in as a result of his friendship with one Doshni Nath, a Hindu fakir. Bulleh Shah was a practicing Sufi who propagated love and was given to music and dance. He laid great stress on deed rather than word because it was only the deed that would help man on the day of judgment. One should therefore not waste time in unnecessary and spiritually unproductive activities. Rather, one should participate in everything that is good for humanity. The last years of his life were spent in Kasur, where he died in 1758. His shrine is located there, where an urse is held annually. So, this was all about his life and preferences and how he lived. These are the 3 poems that we are going to cover from his poetry. The translated versions that we are going to consider are from Tawfiq Rafat's translation. The first poem is Does Anyone Know? That is Bulla Ki Jana Mein Kaun. You might have heard this very famous song. And then the second one is Ranja Ranja Gardi. That is also very famous. And the English translation is The Transformation. And the third one is Neither Hindu nor Muslim. Hindu nahi na Musalman. So these are the 3 poems that we are going to cover from Bulleh Shah.